Net Video. I'm Jason Romney. We're in Melbourne, Australia, where we're talking to Dr. William Cooper from InformITV.com. InformITV.com is one of the world's foremost think tanks and consultancies in the area of IPTV and all the revolutionary changes that are going on affecting the media landscape today. Dr. Cooper, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're distributing a report which concentrates on the changes in the media caused by IPTV. What is IPTV and what has been its impact?
Well, in our report, IPTV, Broadband Meets Broadcast, the Network Television Revolution, we look at IPTV, Internet Protocol Television. IPTV is really television or video services delivered using the same protocols that support the internet. It doesn't necessarily mean television or video services delivered over the internet, but it can. IPTV really employs the same technology that we've seen, that's seen the growth of the World Wide Web, and allows video services to be delivered seamlessly in combination with data and voice services. So for instance, a telco, a telecommunications company, can provide a triple play, a combination of voice, video and data services down a single wire on a single subscriber bill. And that's clearly an attraction for telcos that are losing their share of revenue from fixed line telephony and per minute billing through a combination of factors. Mobile phone services on the one hand, which are eroding their fixed line revenues as people move to mobile phones and turn off their second lines, for instance, that they previously had for the internet as they move to broadband and integrated messaging services. And also the challenge of VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, which is the delivery of telephone services over these same internet protocols. So with IPTV, we're seeing this final convergence really of these media and allowing companies to provide these services in a much more integrated way.
When people have a broadband connection today, which might be via cable or via, say, ADSL through their dial-up connection, is that something which will be able to deliver them IPTV, or will they need some sort of new kind of broadband connection? And if it is new, how will it be different?
Well, it really depends on the market. In the UK, for instance, the majority of exchanges are now capable of delivering broadband to the majority of the country at around 1.5 megabits per second, which is sufficient for some forms of video services. So it really depends on your territory and the local conditions. For instance, in Australia, that might not currently necessarily be the case, but that's really an artificial business or market reason rather than a pure technology limitation. The technology of ADSL, which is asymmetric digital subscriber line, which gives most people broadband over their telephone line, is now capable with the latest generations of giving 18 or 24 megabits per second, which is more than capable of delivering high definition television services if there's the will, the political and business will to deliver those services. It depends on a number of factors, for instance how far away you are from the local exchange. But to all intents and purposes, video over a telephone line is now a practical reality. And in London, for instance, I have an ADSL modem that's delivering me full television quality video and video on demand services, along with 8 megabits of broadband connectivity and also potentially voice services. So yes, this is very much a practical reality today.
If Telstra in Australia did light up an IPTV network, would digital Foxtel become a subset of that IPTV network, or would it continue to be separate from and different from the IPTV environment?
Well, perhaps that's a question that you should put to them. Obviously, it depends on the local conditions in the country. And in Australia, we have the interesting situation that the former monopoly telco has a stake in the leading digital satellite platform and cable platform. So that creates special market conditions that will no doubt need to be resolved. But I think we see a bit of a clue in the fact that in the UK, BSkyB has just announced its intention to acquire a broadband service provider in order to compete in the broadband market. So I think this indicates that perhaps they don't see that the long-term future, or at least will be challenged, of satellite delivery by other two-way forms of communication. So the key thing with IPTV is it's a genuinely two-way interactive service. Satellite currently can't compete with that and can't offer, for instance, video-on-demand services. So I think it's very interesting that BSkyB is making this move, which is indicative of the fact that it does see IPTV both as a threat and an opportunity. And given that they have the content relationships there, their play in this field could be quite significant and could start to move that market forward, which has been relatively stagnant in the UK for quite a while. So for instance, at the moment we only have around 35,000 subscribers to IPTV services in the UK, compared with, let's say, 7.5 million satellite subscribers. So really it's inconsequential in terms of numbers. Really it's the potential and the strategic impact that's more important.
Which companies in the UK offer IPTV today?
Home Choice in the London area is the service to which I subscribe, and Video Networks, which provides the Home Choice service, has really been attempting to provide video over telephone lines for many years, and it's certainly invested a great deal in the process. Some might say it's led the way and shown the light. They are now trying to roll out a service potentially nationally. They're seeking investment to use what's called local loop unbundling, essentially installing their own equipment in BT's exchanges to provide them with high-speed access into a home in the same way as they've done within the London area. In the London area they have a footprint that covers around 2.5 million homes potentially, but currently they've only signed up 35,000 of them, so there's still a way to go.
In the computing world, voice over IP for audio telephony and video conferencing, for example, have become humdrum. Is that going to be somehow different from what people have encountered in the PC world when it's in the TV world?
Well, I think the difference in the general market and with consumer products is that this needs to be packaged in a much more convenient way, frankly, than VoIP is in the computer world. So early adopters and techno enthusiasts might migrate to Skype and the like at the moment, and they're doing so in considerable numbers, but nevertheless this still isn't mainstream for the average consumer. I have a VoIP service that's delivered through a telephone handset, but requires the configuration and installation of a router. It's a complex piece of technology. It's a complex proposition for the average consumer. So the key for this is really to be able to commoditize this, so this is absolutely plug and play, and that's still a challenge for VoIP, and it will also be a challenge for IPTV. BT, for instance, is I think currently envisaging that this will be an engineer install as cable TV and satellite TV is. So this is still not something you'll necessarily be able to buy in the shops and connect up yourself.
Will there actually be a qualitative difference in the kind of IPTV experience?
Well, in terms of the technical quality, there's no, in principle, reason that the user should be aware of any technical difference. It's perfectly possible to deliver a television, a video and audio picture that's comparable with the signal they're receiving through free-to-air television or via satellite or cable. In terms of the type of material, that's a more interesting question. In some ways, the entry level offer really does need to be competitive with the content offering that's available via other platforms. So that suggests that initially it will need to be at least similar and competitive. But there's clearly an opportunity to add a great deal more to that in terms of particularly niche content and on-demand content. So the successful operators will actually offer a great deal more variety than is probably currently made available through current multi-channel television. At the moment, multi-channel television really just gives them more of the same. So there might be 500 channels, but there's still only 5 worth watching for any individual viewer. There might be a different 5, but it's still very similar in that sense to traditional broadcast linear television. In this new on-demand world, potentially we could see a different texture of television with shorter form programs from a much more diverse range of sources and suppliers, possibly in multiple languages, catering for every conceivable niche interest. So we think that we're moving from a world of a few hundred channels to potentially thousands, even millions of programs available on demand.
There are a range of new features coming into the collaborative computing area, such as location awareness, where a device takes a cue from its geography at a particular moment to reconfigure the content that's offered to the user. Now, that's all possible, I think, because of IP addressing and the wonderful world of personalization seamlessly now spanning multiple devices and platforms. This idea of presence awareness that people in the PC world are accustomed to through instant messaging is also coming into the TV world. Are those things able to combine with more conventional TV content to produce, again, qualitatively different experiences in some way?
Possibly, but I don't think really people are thinking about that to the full extent. One significant difference at the moment, for instance, our mobile phone is very much a personal device, so we basically have a unique number that's unique to us in most cases. So that does enable a range of services that can be personalised to the individual. With television, it's still very much more of a family or a home service that's delivered to a subscriber, which is a household rather than an individual. So the question of who's watching is still very relevant, and that's something that still needs to be cracked in order to deliver personalised television. However, targeting to demographics, for instance, at a household level, is certainly something that people are looking at very much, particularly obviously for advertising. The ability to target advertising at a particular household or a demographic or a postcode is very much part of that future.
Do you see the advent of the IPTV era making it easier for content creators, screen producers, in countries such as Australia, smaller countries, certainly ones that are outside the United States and Europe, to get their content before the eyes of the world?
Well, we've been talking about a world of IPTV which is very much seen as telcos see it, or as prospective providers of these services, which is very much that they will provide a cable TV-like experience, which is on a subscription basis, delivered along with, as I say, data and voice services. There's another model, which we call the open source TV model, if you like, whereby potentially once the telephone line's connected to the television, that programming could come from anywhere. And what will initially prevent that is the attempts by the service providers to provide a walled garden of an enclosed service, which keeps people within that subscriber model. Ultimately, we believe that in the long term, the wealth of programming available outside the walled garden will mean that there will be a requirement for people to look beyond that, and for service providers to ultimately allow people to roam beyond that closed subscription network. And we've seen this model, of course, on the net, where people initially attempted to provide closed subscription services, and AOL is a classic example of this, that have effectively had to open up their services because the wealth of material beyond actually had greater value ultimately to the user, even though there was a benefit in operating a walled garden service. So yes, in the longer term, these very networks and the infrastructure that is being built by prospective providers of services will be used to provide open access to programming that's available from beyond the shores or beyond the region that's being provided by that particular service provider. And that provides a very exciting global opportunity for independent producers, for instance, in territories to reach a global market with niche content, to reach a diffuse audience which couldn't potentially be addressed cost effectively or economically by other means, for instance via DVDs or theatrical release in cinemas. But there's very low cost of distribution in a broadband network television world. So very exciting opportunities, I think, for producers to concentrate on providing a product that they can reach a global audience. And so the opportunities for Australia are, the English-speaking world potentially. And I think that that's not necessarily about indigenous production that's about Australia, which seems very much, from what I've been hearing today, seems to be the emphasis today. But it's about the opportunity to reach an English-speaking audience globally.
We touched earlier on the difference between, say, digital Foxtel and IPTV. There's also the difference between IPTV and streaming media of the kind that people get when they watch something from, say, Real Media and the Real Media Real One network. What is the difference there, and what do you see as the future for a company like Real Networks?
Well, technically there's no real difference at all, and Real Networks has really blazed the trail in first bringing audio and subsequently video to the internet. I think the difference is that we need to think about IPTV as delivered to a television set, not necessarily to a computer. It's possible to deliver it to a computer, of course, but the real difference comes when we see it as television on a television set that's qualitatively no different from the signal that we might receive over the air, down a cable, or from a satellite. So technically, delivered via an IP network, it's very similar to streaming media, and we call it unicast, and that is effectively a streaming service. So a video on demand service is effectively a grown-up version, if you like, of a real network service. So no real difference at that level. Now, of course, the experience that people have had to date of these streaming services has been a bit qualitatively indifferent, because people are delivering services over the open internet, possibly over connections that don't have enough speed to support that full service. But as consumer connections to the internet rise in speed from 2, 8, 16, 32 megabits, these limitations will diminish, and that's more than capable of delivering a video signal. So if you speak to the telcos, who have a vested interest, of course, in delivering their closed network walled garden subscription services, they will argue that for technical reasons they need to manage the quality of the service through their managed closed proprietary networks, which will use internet protocols but will have very little to do with the open internet. However, as the speeds that they provide of broadband access rise, and increasing competition causes the demand to rise inexorably, what that means is that individuals will have a higher and higher speed connection to the internet, and quality of service issues start to diminish. So in the same way that we don't really worry about quality of service for email, for instance, over a broadband connection, we're not so worried about how long it takes to load a web page, because it just downloads like that, we'll start to see the same thing with video. So some of the rather indifferent service that we've seen to date with streaming media services will migrate to a full on-demand experience to the television set, either as a live stream, a broadcast stream, a multicast stream, which is a single service going out to lots of people at the same time, or a unicast video on demand stream, or as a download of a file which is stored locally in a set-top box. And in the intermediate phase, what we'll see is local storage, PVRs effectively, with large amounts of local storage connected to the internet, where they can download programs overnight, perhaps in off-peak periods effectively, and making programs available for viewing subsequently. So that offers this enormous opportunity for anybody effectively with a story to tell, with a program to make, to deliver that to a global audience, anybody that's got one of these devices connected to their television.
We've heard here at the Cross Media Lab in Melbourne about the dramatic increase in the number of video blogs, for example, and indeed of services such as that from Sling Media in the United States, which allows people to create an IP tunnel for their content to shoot out to a hotel they might be staying at on the other side of the world. All these new ways of using the internet are very bandwidth intensive. Is there a possibility that we're going to somehow run out of bandwidth? For example, peer-to-peer networks address that problem, but they're being shut down by litigation.
Well, actually, there's vast potential in the core backbones, largely as a result of very aggressive build-outs during the last dot-com boom, and vast amounts of fibre capacity put in place. Now, the thing to understand about fibre optics is virtually unlimited bandwidth is made available. Now, certainly there are bottlenecks in the switches and the connections to the home, but theoretically at least, fibre can offer far more bandwidth than the ether can to deliver airwaves, for instance. So the capacity is theoretically unlimited. Certainly there are infrastructure limitations and concerns around this, but the example that I used earlier was that, for instance, in Hong Kong, the metro networks there that are based on fibre optics that can deliver 17 million concurrent DVD quality streams of video, and that's more than the population of Hong Kong. So that suggests that there's more than enough bandwidth, even in the existing infrastructure, in the core networks that are there today. So I think it's very important to understand that these aren't necessarily theoretical technical limitations in the overall bandwidth. So yes, there's certainly a technology problem there, but fibre optic in particular can deliver far more raw bandwidth than wireless, for instance, ever can.
Minister Helen Coonan here in Australia is frantically trying to think up an efficient way to divvy up things like the formerly datacasting bandwidth. What would you advise her about the best way to organise things here?
Well, far be it from me to advise the Minister of State for the Australian government, but I'd love an opportunity, obviously. But I think one of the things that we can learn, perhaps from the UK experience, is the story that we've seen with Freeview, for instance, free-to-air terrestrial television, which, second time around at least, has been an enormous success and has actually been one of the fastest growing consumer electronics propositions that we've seen, even outstripping the growth curve of DVD. So I think there's actually an enormous amount that can be learned about the environment that's been created in the UK and the regulatory regime that's been put in place to stimulate a competitive environment that benefits the consumer.
Dr. William Cooper from Inform ITV, if people want to contact you or look at your website, where do they go?
If they go to informitv.com, then they can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. If you just go to the subscribe link at informitv.com, and if you want to contact me, the contact details are there.
And finally, do you have any thoughts on the Cross Media Lab?
Well, it's been a very stimulating experience.
Thank you very much for coming on Net Video today.
Thank you.